Well, hello, this is Mark Fandel again. We are going to be looking at the skeletal system. We're still in chapter 7. This is video number 3. It's going to be slides 12 through 16 on our PowerPoints from McGraw-Hill. And today we're going to be looking at some functions of bones. So first of all, I mean, it just kind of goes without saying, bones provide shape. So for something like the head, you can kind of tell that it would provide the shape for it. And just really your entire body, the shape of your body is dictated by the bones. Bones support the body weight. They actually create a lot of the body weight, but they support it. And they provide protections. All right, so it's pretty easy to see the brain idea. The cranial cavity is basically this really well put together helmet to protect the brain, but you've also got the ribs and the thoracic cage that's protecting the heart and the lungs. And so bones provide protection. Um, the bones of the pelvic girdle protect the internal reproductive organs. Um, but one of the things that probably should be what we think of the most is they're going to help with movement. Bones, along with muscles, skeletal muscles in particular, are going to provide movement for our skeleton. And that is the skeletal muscular system, which really isn't one of the systems, but it's kind of the combination of how it works. Now, an important thing, and this will come up again in 211 next semester when you're in 211 and you're in the chapter of blood, the first chapter you get into in 211, you'll talk about how all of the bone cells, the different types of bone cells, how they're formed. The term is hematopoiesis. Again, if when you get into that class, you'll find out that erythrocytes, which are red blood cells, or if it's specifically about them, it's called erythropoiesis. But hematopoiesis is just a general catch-all term for blood cell formation. Um, the reason that we look at it in the skeletal system is that it is found, these cells, the stem cells for that, are found in red bone marrow. So whether it is red blood cells, which we call erythrocytes, white blood cells, which we call leukocytes, and there are 5 types of leukocytes, 5 different types of leukocytes, or platelets, all of them are produced by the same grandmother cell that is found in the red bone marrow. And producing any of them is a process called hematopoiesis. Um, Now, this is something that I will just kind of briefly talk about. That I won't test you on necessarily this part, but well, those are some wavy lines. Anyway, as you age, red bone marrow generally starts getting replaced by yellow bone marrow, which is just simply storage. And so with that, that means you're losing some of the ability to make blood. And I try to use this analogy for most systems, but this is a really big one here that your body functions on a use it or lose it basis. We kind of know it with our muscles. If you don't exercise, they waste away. As you get older, you'll see that if you become more sedentary, your bones will waste away. But your red bone marrow, as it turns to yellow bone marrow, you need to do something to remind it that it is needed. And I encourage you to donate blood if you can. Not everybody can, but if you can, donate blood. Not only is it good for it helps people and whatever, but it actually provides some help for you in the fact that um, everything functions on use it or lose it. If you are using your red bone marrow, it makes it easier for your body to keep it and not have it turn to yellow bone marrow. So red bone marrow is generally found in spongy bone, but it is found mainly in spongy bones that are flat, or the spongy bone of the flat bones. So this red bone marrow is what, if someone ever has to have a bone marrow transplant, that's what they're trying to get. The person is having a problem creating red blood cells, or blood cells in general. More than likely, it's probably white blood cells. But anyway, so the reason they would try to harvest red bone marrow is to get these stem cells that are in there. Another thing is it is a storage area, and it says here inorganic salts. And again, remember, inorganic salts are just fancy ways of saying electrolytes and all that other thing. But the main one is calcium. Now, the most abundant is calcium phosphate, and we'll look at that. But calcium is going to be the key. We're going to look at how our body stores calcium, and there's going to be this cycle that's going to try to keep your uh, blood calcium levels normal. But there's other ones that are in there, magnesium, sodium, as it says, potassium. But the star of the show, the main one, is going to be calcium, and it is stored attached to phosphate in the bone. Now, as your body starts rating, or as your body gets older, a lot of times it starts rating your bone of calcium and minerals, in particular calcium, but that is called osteoporosis. That's why it's important, one, to exercise, because again, the use it or lose it basis, if you're not exercising, your body will start taking away bone mass. We're going to look at this in one of the future videos, talking about how stress plays a role in it, which just means weight bearing. One of the things that is a big challenge for our space program is the weightless or lowered weight environment, and how much your body will just start pulling minerals away from your bones and cause them to be fragile. Um, the reason that calcium, again, is being stored in the skeleton isn't because the skeleton needs it. Now, it does, we know that, but it's really about making sure that I have enough calcium in my blood for, one, muscle contraction. In the next chapter, when we look at one of the next chapters, when we look at muscles, you'll see that muscle contraction is the key. Calcium is the key to muscle contraction. It is what starts it. And your heart is the main muscle as far as muscles go, so it's going to make sure it has calcium for it. And the other one, and the grand poobah of it all, is nerve impulses. When we get into the nervous system and we're looking at how an axon sends a signal at the synapse, where it's transmitting the signal to the next neuron, it is calcium that enters the synaptic bulb that causes the release of the neurotransmitter. And again, if you don't know those terms, that's all right. Right now, we're going to get into them later on when we get into the nervous system. This is the cycle of blood calcium. Now, I'm going to try to draw this. I'm hoping that I do all right. But so we've got homeostasis. So imagine homeostasis is this balancing act, and I want to have a little set point to be normal. And so my body has a blood calcium set point that, again, is normal. And so if all of a sudden it starts increasing, my body has to do something to bring it down. If the blood calcium levels is decreasing, I need to do something to bring it up. And I think that everybody can I hope that you understand that. Now, our skeletal system, and so I'll again try to draw this. That's bad. So our skeletal system is where we're going to store most of our calcium. And it's just simply, boy, this looks like a real Nightmare Before Christmas type skeleton here. So anyway, this is my attempt at drawing a skeleton on the little mouse pad there. But let's say that all of a sudden I have an elevated blood calcium level. I need to bring it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to produce a hormone that will go out to the skeleton and increase the rate of creating bone. Because basically I have building material. I want to do something to create bone. That's how I store it. So if I have excess, I put it in bone for storage for later. Now again, if you go to the grocery store and let's say you like green beans and you're running low and the grocery store has a huge sale on it, you'll buy a whole bunch and put them in your cupboard because you want, cans of them, because you want to save them. If you have excess is when you save. So if I have excess blood calcium, I need to do something that's going to take that calcium out of the blood and put it into bone. Now, first, bone cells that create bone, we call those osteoblasts. So osteoblasts, and I'm just going to put an OB here, osteoblast, they get activated, and they start taking the calcium out of the blood and put it to bone. Now, and what that does is that lowers my blood calcium levels because I'm removing it from the blood and put it to bone. Now, let's say I have it to where my blood calcium levels drop. At that point, I'm going to create a hormone that's going to go out to the skeleton. It's going to take the calcium out, start putting it into blood, and now I'm going to increase blood calcium levels. Now you're going to find out that this type of bone cell that breaks down bone is called an osteoclast. And I'm going to put OC here. Now, the hormones are the key. And here's the real interesting thing. So if I was to come over here and say, I'll do it here. I have two hormones, and each one is going to have two glands, two endocrine glands over here, and each endocrine gland is going to release a hormone. Right? So if I did that and told you that there is a pattern, and if I took these three and had one word, I should be able to remember all three of them. The two glands are the thyroid, and I'm just going to put a T here, the thyroid, and the parathyroid. Now, para means around. The parathyroid is sitting on the thyroid. So thyroid and parathyroid, those are the two glands. And the cool thing about the parathyroid gland is it only secretes one hormone. And that hormone is the parathyroid hormone. And again, sorry, writing with the mouse pad. So with one word, I don't care. I mean, to me, if you remember, I would use thyroid. Remember thyroid, and remember that thyroid goes with parathyroid. Those are the two glands. And all you have to do about parathyroid PT is remember it only secretes one hormone, and it's called parathyroid hormone. You should be able to figure that out, or that at this stage in our academic career, remembering that parathyroid gland secretes a hormone called parathyroid hormone should be pretty straightforward. So the key ends up being this one that doesn't play well. So with one word, and I'm going to just use thyroid, I can remember all three. If you want to just remember parathyroid, just remember that two parathyroids and then one thyroid. Whatever the case may be, with one small puzzle piece, you should get three of these. Now, the one that is the key, there's a term called the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is basically saying that if you had languages. Back when they were doing a lot of archaeological work, they found this stone that had three different languages on it. And they couldn't they found a bunch of stones with these languages. They couldn't figure out what it was, and they found this one that had three languages on it. And one of the language was ancient Greek. And since we knew ancient Greek, we could unlock the other two languages, which unlocked all these other archaeological finds. And so they call that stone the Rosetta Stone. And that's where that term comes from. So the Rosetta Stone of this whole thing is this one hormone. And that hormone is called calcitonin. Calcitonin. Okay. I hate this. I'm sorry. That's supposed to be an I. So if you can remember, calcitonin puts calcium into bone. Calcitonin puts calcium into bone. I'll say it once again. Calcitonin puts calcium into bone. All right. This is a really important thing. This is going to come up a couple times in the future. It's going to, especially in 211. But calcitonin puts calcium into bone. So the calcitonin is going to be released when I have elevated blood calcium levels. It's going to stimulate osteoblasts, and it's going to remove the calcium from the blood and put it into bone. Calcitonin puts calcium into bone. And if I know that this side is calcitonin, and the two hormones are calcitonin and parathyroid, then I know this over here is parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone would stimulate osteoclasts and pull the calcium out of bone. Now, again, don't stress too much about this. I would kind of try to remember that little framework. There might be one, maybe two questions at the most on this test with that. But when you get into 211, this becomes in the endocrine system and also, surprisingly, in the urinary system, because we'll see that this has some effects on the urinary system. But this is a framework of how our body keeps our bones as a storage closet for blood calcium levels. I hope that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next video.